There are moments, quiet, heavy ones, when you feel like you've gone too far, said too much, failed too often, when shame creeps in and whispers that maybe you're just too broken for grace. And in that place, it's tempting to retreat, to hide from God, to assume His love has limits. But here's the truth. It doesn't. God's love is not like ours. It's not based on performance, mood, or convenience. It doesn't rise and fall with your behavior. It's not fragile. It's not hesitant. It's not conditional. Scripture calls it unfailing because it holds even when you don't. It pursues even when you pull away. It forgives even when you don't know how to ask. When you feel unworthy, grace is not withheld. It's drawn closer, because grace isn't for the perfect. It's for the desperate, for the weary, for the ashamed. And the more you feel like you don't deserve it, the more you're in the perfect position to receive it. That's the upside-down beauty of the gospel. The very thing that disqualifies you in your eyes is what grace responds to. You can't outrun this kind of love. You can't out-sin it, out-fail it, or out-doubt it. It shows up in your lowest moments and reminds you, God didn't choose you because you were worthy. He chose you because He is good, and His love isn't afraid of your mess. In fact, it moves into it. Grace doesn't wait for you to feel worthy. It meets you where you are and reminds you that worth was never the requirement. Love was. That's why it's so hard to grasp, because everything else in life is earned. But God's love, it's given, freely, completely, even when you're full of doubt, even when you're tired of trying, even when you feel like the apology is too late. He's still there, holding out the same invitation. Come back. You don't have to fix yourself to return to God. You return, and He begins the healing. He doesn't say, "Where have you been?" He says, "I'm glad you're home." The story of the prodigal son isn't just about rebellion. It's about return. And when the son finally came back, the father didn't lecture him. He ran to him, embraced him, restored him. That's what love looks like when it has nothing left to prove. You might feel unworthy because of what you've done, or because of what's been done to you. Either way, God's love reaches both. It doesn't just patch over wounds. It enters them. It sits with you in the pain. And slowly, gently, it begins to speak a new story. One not built on shame, but on mercy. This is what unfailing love does. It doesn't ignore the past. It redeems it. It doesn't erase your story. It reclaims it. And you, even in your most unworthy moments, are still the one He wants. Sometimes the hardest thing to believe isn't that God exists. It's that He still loves you. After all the mistakes, after the silence, after the promises you broke and the prayers you stopped praying. But God's love isn't fragile. It doesn't shatter under the weight of your failures. It bends low. It reaches deep. And it holds on, even when you've let go. Shame says, hide. Grace says, come close. Shame says, you're dirty. Grace says, you're already washed. That's the scandal of God's love. It doesn't wait for you to clean up to come in. It meets you in the dirt, the doubt, the fear, and says, I still want you. Not a future version of you. You, right now. When Jesus touched the leper, He didn't become unclean. The leper became whole. That's what His love does. It doesn't fear your mess. It transforms it. And every time you think you've gone too far, grace whispers, this is where healing begins. If this stirred something in you, subscribe and turn on the bell, not just to follow a channel, but to walk a journey of faith, one truth at a time. The love of God is not intimidated by your history. It doesn't flinch at your failures or retreat from your regret. It moves toward you, not away. While others may define you by your worst moments, God sees you through the lens of grace. He remembers who you were created to be, not just who you've become in brokenness. And His mission is simple: to restore that image, one encounter at a time. You see, the world teaches us that love has limits, that forgiveness must be earned, that worth is something you perform for. But the gospel flips all of that. God loved you before you did a thing for Him, before you repented, before you believed, before you even breathed. His love was already there, constant, pure, unshakable. When you truly begin to embrace that, something in you softens. You stop trying to outrun your past. You stop hiding behind masks of perfection. You stop performing, and you start receiving. And that receiving, that's where real transformation begins. Because what grace touches, it doesn't just clean, it changes. Don't let guilt convince you that God is distant. His nearness is not earned, it's promised. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted, Scripture says. Not to the perfect, not to the polished, but to the broken. And in that closeness, you'll find a love that doesn't just forgive, it stays. When you believe you're loved only at your best, you'll hide your worst. But the beauty of God's love is that it meets you in the exact places you want to cover. It shines light in your shame, and it doesn't flinch, because He already knows. Every fear, every failure, every part you thought disqualified you, and He still chose you. That's not just love. That's unfailing love. You don't have to work your way back into God's arms. You never left His heart. The road home doesn't require perfection, just honesty, just a simple turning. Grace does the rest. It fills the gaps you can't. It holds what you drop. And slowly, it begins to remind you of who you were before shame rewrote your story. So much of the healing begins when you stop asking, "Am I enough?" and start trusting He is. Because when you fix your eyes on His sufficiency, your unworthiness becomes irrelevant. Not because it disappears, but because His mercy speaks louder than your mistakes. That's the voice of grace, steady, gentle, and relentless. And when you begin to believe it, really believe it, you'll stop striving. You'll stop punishing yourself. You'll start resting in the truth that what you could never earn was given to you fully, freely, and forever. Grace doesn't make sense because it was never meant to be logical. It was meant to be received. That's why it offends pride and heals the humble. It doesn't come to the ones who have it all together. It comes to the ones who've run out of reasons to believe they're worthy, and whispers, "You still are." God's love doesn't require you to feel strong. It just invites you to be honest. Because healing doesn't happen where we perform. It happens where we're real. And in that realness, His Spirit moves. Gently, silently, powerfully. There's no formula, no magic words. Just a God who sees everything, knows everything, and still says, "I'm not leaving." We live in a world that keeps score, that says, "You are what you achieve. You are what you fix. You are what others think of you." But the cross rewrites that narrative. It says, "You are loved, even when you lose. You are chosen, even when you fall. You are mine, even when you forget me." That kind of love doesn't just comfort, it changes you. You don't have to carry the weight of proving your worth. You don't have to outrun your past or manage your image. You only have to receive. And the moment you do, even in brokenness, the healing begins. Not with loud miracles, but with quiet mercy. The kind that stays. The kind that never lets go. You don't have to earn what's already yours. You don't have to chase what's been chasing you your whole life. God's love is not waiting for your perfection. It's already proven in your pain. The cross didn't just happen for the righteous. It happened for the weary, the wounded, the ones who keep trying and still fall. And in that falling, grace doesn't walk away. It kneels down beside you and whispers, "I still choose you." This love doesn't give up. It doesn't expire. It doesn't depend on your progress. It's rooted in God's character, not your performance. That means even when you fail, you're not forgotten. Even when you doubt, you're not dismissed. And even when you walk away, He waits, not with a lecture, but with open arms. So let go of the guilt, of the story shame keeps repeating in your mind. Let grace rewrite it. Let love be louder. You were never meant to live stuck in the fear of being unworthy. You were meant to live free, held by a love that cannot be undone. This is what makes grace so powerful. It doesn't just meet you where you are. It walks with you into who you're becoming. And every step, no matter how shaky, is still moving you closer to the heart of God. And now ask yourself this: if you truly believed God's love would never fail you, how different would you treat yourself?